Today's video is brought to you by my amazing patrons on Patreon. Priority deck requests and extended discussions are just some of the many perks you get for being a patron. Consider supporting the channel today. Welcome back to today's build. Whether you're just looking for upgrades or have no idea how to build this deck, I'll be your guide to this wonderful game we all love. Let's get started. Today's deck just keeps coming back. Their names are Slimefoot and Squee, and this is a Bad Fungus. The first thing that we need to make this reanimation work is a way to move our commander to the graveyard. Since the most expedient way to do that is to first move them to the battlefield, we'll definitely need reusable sack outlets. But don't move the commander to the graveyard until you're ready to reanimate, or else your opponents could strand them in the graveyard by wiping your board. Next, we need to know what kinds of things we're reanimating and how we're going to get those cards to the graveyard. It would be really convenient if we got these cards to the graveyard the same way we put our commander there, but I don't think that's very practical, since we'd have to first get those creatures to the battlefield. So we probably want ways to discard those creatures in exchange for some benefit. In particular, one-cost cyclers are really convenient, but we need more than that to reap the most value, since we're cheating the most mana when reanimating heavier mana costs. Since performing all this setup requires a lot of game actions, we want to find as much ramp, interaction, and card draw as possible from our intermediate steps, and ideally have our reanimation targets do something the turn they come down. The last thing to take note of is the saprolings. Our commander does require a single saproling in play, but it doesn't scale to larger numbers and always replaces the one we use, fulfilling its own requirements. So this is not a saproling tribal deck. It's a deck that will have some saprolings, and it's a big difference. EDH rec lists many saproling tribal pieces in part of the deck list, but as previously discussed, that's not what Slimefoot and Squee asks for. Some amount of redundancy is good, just in case something goes wrong with our game plan, but that redundancy needs to serve other functions besides saproling generation, so we'll make these changes. Conrad and Cutthroat both want to be in this deck, since our game plan provides them a lot of triggers, but the deck doesn't actually want them. Conrad is a little bulky at 5 mana, and the Cutthroat takes up an important piece in our timeline, where we either want to discard or play a sack outlet, meaning neither hit the board until late game when they'll see fewer deaths overall. Meanwhile, Blasphemous Act just sends us back to the Stone Age, regardless of what it does to opponents. What we really want for a board wipe is something that can ignore smaller creatures and only hit bigger ones, which isn't very common in these colors, but we'll make these swaps for now. Lastly, the only of these reanimation targets doing anything we want is Sheoldred, and we can get an Edict much more easily than this. Ziatora can sacrifice our commander, but remember we have to be careful about when we sack Slimefoot and Squee, and this timing is not that. So let's make these swaps. So what do our lands look like? It is extremely important that we fix our colors by turn 3, so you absolutely want a strong suite of dual lands, and in particular, I like typed duals that we can find with our land cyclers, some of which can be cycled away themselves, when we don't need them since our actual curve is so low. So what's our timeline? Turn 1 is a great time to set up either a graveyard or a sack outlet with any of these cards that get other advantages as well, or any of these on turn 2. Turn 3 is our target for our commander, so make sure you fixed your mana by this turn to start on turn 4 with a saproling in play. If we're ready to reanimate, we'll attack first to get an extra saproling before sacrificing and reanimating as close to the same time as possible. Otherwise, we'll play these cards to pull it off the next turn. Turn 5 and beyond, we start reanimating, finding ways to loop these interactive creatures using our onboard sack outlets to secure the board, before turning to whichever of the next 2 paths are most accessible. Either we need to develop a board with these cards, or we tutor our next key piece with Hoarding Broodlord. There are so many ways to close things out here, it's kinda silly. The next thing that comes to mind is we reanimate Razaketh into play and sacrifice Slimefoot to find Ruthless Technomancer. Ruthless Technomancer sacrifices Razaketh to make 8 treasures, which can loop Slimefoot and Razaketh back out. This loop actually works with any free sack outlet and any 8 power creature. But I like this version best, since both the sack outlet and the creature are on the same card, and we get to tutor any number of other cards this way. Search up Goblin Bombardment or Altar of Dementia to enable knockouts for our opponents. But the secondary win condition is what I found a little more engaging. There are a lot of times when you end up with spare saprolings. A lot of them, actually. And some of the most appealing reanimation targets also represent a board state on demand. So reanimating any of these creatures can be extremely lethal, with Craterhoof coming in for off budget. This deck can punch. As long as you're careful not to sacrifice Slimefoot and Squee at the wrong time, there's little that can be done about the deluge of threats that come down, since your opponents would have to attack you on multiple zones to shut this off. And even by the time a coordinated effort can be made, you usually got the mana to hard cast your biggest threats.
A very special thanks to all my amazing patrons. When I started this channel, I wanted to talk about deck building decisions with my videos, but in practice what ends up happening is that I talk for 30 minutes about all the nuance of a deck, which is longer than I'm comfortable with posting to YouTube. Here, patrons can request priority deck techs, access extended discussions on their favorite decks, in-depth guides on complex game actions, and more.
So if you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron today. One of the things my patrons have made possible is a special series of deck techs that I'm really excited to show off to you guys. When I finally get them all uploaded, I'll be giving away a special collection of altars and tokens that I've made, corresponding to each deck on the channel. For example, for the Merkle Lord of Bones deck, the prize is a set of double-faced altars of the most prominent cards in the deck, whose backsides are set in the constellation frame with updated text to show that they're acting as enchantments now. For every 1,000 views on each video, I'll increase the prize pool for that deck. All you have to do to be eligible to win is be subscribed to the channel.
Consider supporting the channel today. If you like this video, here are some of the decks I'm working on next, so if you like what you see, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and check out the playlist in the top left for more. Thanks for watching!